So many of you already know that I've been working and using narrative concepts in jail with women. So I've put together a little presentation about my work in jail. So I've been sharing a lot in all of our things. So this is kind of everything, the entire process from start to end. I think the biggest thing that narrative helped me do was identify discourses in myself. Because before I went in, I had an image of what these women would look like, and I thought that they would be very hard, very brutish and tattooed and very okay with being singular. And it took me a while to identify that this was what was happening in my head. And it was very nice that as I went along the blocks, my work in prison also started to progress, and it ended around the same time. So I really kind of grew up with the narrative concepts, and I was able to take them in. So discourses, I was completely wrong. When I went in, so this picture isn't showing, but there were a lot of metaphors that I took away. When I went in the first time and I spoke to the women, I realized that there was so much heart. There was so much longing. They did not like being alone. They did not like being away from their families. They had become, as a collective, all their stories were making me think of a barren land, parched where no rain had fallen for really long. And it was very difficult for me, that first session. So just a few things so that we all understand what the setting is like. It was very cold, closed and isolated, not just in terms of the physical structure and setting, but also in terms of the stories that the women were telling me. And they all wanted to tell me their stories. All of them, they did not want to sit in a circle and do this group session that I had planned. They just wanted to say, this happened. I didn't do anything, or even if I did, I don't want to be here. I remember one of the most powerful things I heard from a mother was, what is the meaning of life sentence? Who decides what life means? And what is the repercussions of this? Just a judge sitting and saying life sentence. Does anyone take a hisab of this? What happens to a family when the mother is taken away? The whole family collapses. Who takes responsibility for the lives affected by putting mothers in a place like jail? And I know there's no answer. And she told me this. I am not expecting any answers from you, but I want to ask this question. There's a complete loss of power, control over events and outcomes. No one knows how long they're going to be in there. No one knows what's going to happen, who's going to get angry, who's going to say what. Everything is moment to moment being ready for something, bracing yourself for something. Broken down social systems, you're taken away from everything and everyone you know forcibly, and you're put into a new place where you're expected to form a relationship with people. Lack of stimulation, there's nothing. They sit in their rooms, not rooms, the barracks, and there is no color on the walls, there is nothing to do. There are bits of paper that they would read over and over again, newspaper bits. Some old magazines, if one woman knew something about art, she would take a session, but very ad hoc. There was no real mental, cognitive, emotional stimulation of any sort. There's a lot of fear about what's going to happen, fear stemming from the fact that someone else now has control over your life. Hopelessness and depression, a lot of it, and internalization of stigma. The stigma of being a woman who has done something wrong, a woman who's not a good mother, not a good wife, not a good daughter. She's apart, away, and of also being a prisoner in our society. So for me, where it all began, I didn't know what to do. And Daisy, being my supervisor, I really didn't know where to start, and I didn't know what their worlds looked like. So she said, put down some of the questions you have. So I asked myself, what do I know about this group? And I realized I know nothing, and I realized I'm not the expert. And so who is the expert? The group becomes the expert. And what are the stories there? Only they can tell me. Also, questions I had was, narrative in a group means what? Like, how do I do this? How do I do this line of inquiry, these maps with, say, 30 women? And how do I translate the person is not the problem is the problem? That was a big thing for me, because the women that I was working with, they are not victims. As in, they are in jail because they are seen as perpetrators. The reason for violence, they are seen as the problem. They see themselves as the problem. So I was wondering and asking myself constantly, how do I not look at them as problems? How do I take this out of my mind? And I had a lot of fear going in. I didn't know what to expect. So letting go of that, all of my ideas and discourses, these were some of the things that I went in with. And we had done the My World activity. So Daisy said, why don't you just do that, since you don't know anyway. Let's see what comes up. And I think that was the starting point for me. Just some of the reasons why I took it was just to understand what the lived realities were. Really, how do these women see their world? If I don't ask them, what did you do, which is how sessions start, when people go to take documentation, they ask the women, why you here, what did you do? And I was very clear that I didn't want to ask that question. I didn't want to know. It didn't matter to me. Because I didn't want to see them as problems, so I just didn't want to know. I just wanted to know, what are they experiencing every day? What does this world that they are living in look like? To allow a space for reflection, sharing, witnessing. A lot of them were telling me the first time I went in that they are alone, nobody understands. And yet each of them were saying that. That meant somewhere there was a similarity. Somewhere there was a shared experience that I wanted them to be able to see. I wanted to make that visible to them. So I thought, in a group setting, if they are all talking about their stories and they are all similar stories, there is some power that's going to be generated there. I did something different that I've never done before. I became a participant in that session. I drew my world and my loneliness, my fears, and my depression. And I shared that with the group. I mean, I thought, I'm saying that this is a safe space, and if it's a safe space, I should be able to share. So I did that, and there was a lot of power in doing that. And there were, of course, I did that very instinctively, on the fly. I didn't intend to do it, I didn't plan to do it. But in that moment when I was standing there and waiting for them to finish their drawings, I felt hierarchical. I felt like I was standing apart, and I didn't want to do that. So I just sat and I drew that. And I allowed them to see what my life looks like, and that sometimes being women who live alone or are alone can have similarities, whether it's in jail or outside jail. And I think that really shifted something, because the women got very emotional and they just started sharing a lot. Our conversation just went onto a level like talking about identity of a woman in society, and talking about what does it mean to be married. And no, I have never felt free, it's not just about being here, but even outside I don't feel free. I get what you're saying. Even I feel afraid when I'm traveling in the train. And so different sort of stories started coming up just by doing that. But the metaphors that were emerging for me were caged, closed, dark, stripped. Those are the stories. All of their artwork was crying, in jail. Some of them did not draw human figures. They drew ducks, they drew animals, they drew flowers, incarceration, like bars and flowers or animals. I felt that there was a lot of vulnerability in that group, and it just gave me a whole opening into. It made me realize something that Daisy had said is, if they are saying what they don't like and they don't want, that means they know in some way what they would want. So I was like, okay, so what would that possibility look like? What kind of possibilities can one create in a space like this? So that was the question that kind of drove me for the next few sessions. So this is actually landscape of Mars, like the planet, but I thought it really it showed what was coming up: barren, nothing green, no possibilities, no hope. This is what came to my mind, so I thought I'd just share that with you guys. So seeds of possibility, that's what I wanted to sow. And I took up a lot of metaphors, because metaphors were just flying in my face every time I went in there. When you want to plant something, you really have to work to loosen the earth, to prepare the ground, right? It's been years. If something's lain fallow, you need to start working from the earth. And I think that is something I realized, because I was giving them these fabulous metaphors and possibilities, and after a week, we were back to square one. And that's when Daisy told me, well, scaffolding. And what if it's a really scary thing to look at possibilities for these women? They don't have any control. How can you expect them to imagine a world where there are no bars and no walls? So I went back to asking questions. Just asking questions after activities. We did a lot of drama, a lot of body-based work. And the question every day for them as a homework question that I would give was, what could possibilities look like over here? 2 minutes more. Okay, so I'm going to do this very fast. So basically, scaffolding, a lot of scaffolding, I gave them a lot of action-based work. We did a lot of drama, a lot of storytelling, embodiment, activities that they could keep with them. We also talked a lot about this. If the person is not the problem, what is the problem? Why are we here? Let's go a couple of steps back. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a mother? What were the opportunities that we didn't have? We did journeys. We did a lot of metaphors in nature that were familiar, like the growth of trees, the fear of change. We talked about rivers and the movement of a river. What is my ultimate goal? So a lot of these things and themes came up. So when we were doing Landscape of Identity and Action, I realized that we were doing a lot of talking, and how could I anchor any of this in action? So that's when I started doing a lot of homework stuff, give them stuff to write. I did a lot of therapeutic letters with them. I told them, write me letters, I will write you back. I asked them to write me questions that they had about the world, and they put down questions like, what is love? Why do people cheat? Why am I in jail when I didn't do anything wrong? Okay, is there any other way to mete out a saza? Okay, I did something wrong, but does it really need to have so many lives destroyed? So questions like that, which really, our sessions ended a little abruptly, but my intention was and still is to kind of build a living document out of that, to put all of those questions together, possible answers, and keep it there, and they can keep adding and keep asking more questions for themselves. Outsider witness is something I'd just like to talk about for a few seconds, because this is something that I use differently. So there is no structure. I would go, there would be no room. There would be 12 women interested in participating and about 30 women wanting to just see what's going on. So I wondered, how can I not get hassled by this? What can I do? And that's when we heard about outsider witness. And I thought, let me use this entire group as outsiders to witness. So I would ask them questions. They would just stand in the background. They would not want to participate. They would not want to do any movement. So I would ask them, seeing this movement, seeing these women participate, what is that making possible for you? Are there any images or thoughts coming to you? And by the end of the session, those women would also be moved to tears. And seeing that response, the core 12 who were constant would be feeling, okay, I did something. So we did therapeutic questions, and something I was able to do, even though it ended really abruptly, I was able to do a definitional ceremony. Okay, and what I did was, since I wanted this to be a celebration, I took in Mehndi, and so I smuggled it in a little bit actually, because I wasn't supposed to, but I said this is extremely important. We have an art session. So I took it in and I told the women that what we are going to do today is nothing about Shadi Ki Mehndi. We are going to leave an imprint of joy and hope onto each other's bodies. We are going to ask permission. We are going to ask where this person would like to receive a symbol of joy and hope, and then we're going to make a symbol. So these women, a lot of whom who had never done any art, were doing kites with Mehndi. They were wondering, what is freedom, hope and joy to me? And they were drawing symbols on each other's feet, on each other's hands, on each other's bodies. And there was some sense of joy for me to see that, and that it was something that was made possible. Another thing that happened was I made certificates. I hand printed these people tree leaves. And in one of the sessions, I gave them a lot of prints of pictures of people trees in different stages. So some were huge trees with big roots, some were in bottles, some were growing in cracks in the walls. And I said, walk around, pick up what resonates with you, and we'll talk about it. And we just talked about, so we used a seed as a metaphor throughout. And one of the things that they said was, a seed doesn't know that it's not supposed to grow in a crack. It doesn't know that. right? And because it doesn't know, it's possible for it to grow. So if I go back out, yeah, I'm done. If I go back out and I don't have this stigma and ideas about what life will be, maybe something will be possible. So what I told them to do was to write, just the last line, I promise. I asked them to draw their leaves and to write something that they had received from the session. And they put down things like Atma Vishwas. So this is also my creative documentation. They put down Atma Shanti, Sakaratmak Drushtikon, which is like positive thinking. A lot of them wrote Rag Shant Zala, which is my anger has, come down. I don't know substantial or what, but a lot of them said Shanti, Khushi. I have received a lot of love from these sessions, like all of those things. So when I was making their certificates, I wrote their names, and in the same way that they had written their adjectives, I thought rather than I coming up with, I was thinking of some fanciful words in English. I didn't know how to translate them, like emotion catcher, emotion identifier. Then I thought, why bother? And I just used what each of them had said about themselves. And I had like a formal certification ceremony where I called out their names and gave them their certificates. And they were so thrilled. They were taking imaginary selfies. They made me one. There were excess. So they made me one. And they told me, you need to take this back and remember what you've done. I think at the end, it's just shoots for both of us. There was a lot of growth for me. This is one of the images that they really liked because they were able to say, this is what anchors me, and this is where I want to go. These are what my leaves are going to be. And yeah, this is just one quote. I remember who I am now. So this is a fine art student, and she would not draw or do any art in the beginning. And at the end, she told me, by the way, I'm a fine art student, and now I realize I remember who I am now. There are many things that are scary outside, but I know I have the skills to make my life good again and get all that I want. So, yeah. And thank you so much.